If you're in midlife and wondering where the hell your desire went or how to get it back and make it hotter than ever, you just found your show. I am Dr. Stacy, clinical sexologist and certified sex coach, and this is the Purple Passion Project, the intimacy and sex podcast for midlife and beyond. Just real spicy conversations about desire, intimacy, and pleasure that will change the way you think about your sex life forever. Let's do it. What do you get when you mix purple, passion, and permission to be your true self? This podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Stacy, and this is the Purple Passion Project, coming to you live and unfiltered. It's the show where we talk sex, intimacy, connection, and everything underneath the surface, because let's be honest, small talk is boring and you're ready for the good stuff. So relax, drop your guard, get ready for some truth, laughs, maybe a few gasps, and a whole lot of passion. And so today I want to introduce, joined by Lee Baucom, a PhD level trained therapist turned marriage coach with over 35 years in the field. And he's the creator of Save the Marriage System, author of 7 books, and the founder of the Unpause app, which is designed to help couples reconnect when the relationship has hit the pause button. So we're going to hear a lot about that today. And he believes that something most people are not told: you don't need your spouse fully on board to save a marriage. So we focus on systems, habits, and intentional action that help stuck relationships. So let's bring them on and we'll get started. Hello.
Hey, Stacy, good to have you. Good to be on with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I
Yeah,
see that there's going to be a lot of good, juicy stuff that we're going to talk about, because it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you're doing is helping a lot of people.
I hope so. I mean, that is my intent, is to get people to rediscover what's possible in their relationships. And if not, then to figure out what to do from there.
Awesome. Awesome. So when I was talking about the little introduction about the pause button, I just want to kind of get a brief idea about what does that mean when you say couples are hitting the pause button.
Yeah, and it's a pretty natural stage for people unless they know about it, which is part of my thing, is to let people know ahead of time. Unfortunately, many times it's hard to pre-warn couples
Right.
as they get married that this is going to happen because they think they have it figured out. So generally, when we meet this person and are falling in love, we have all of this energy going into the relationship. We invest heavily into that, and our focus is there. And then we decide at some point to make it a lifetime thing and have this short little ceremony, and off to the world we go. And that's when things have this pivot point, right? And it's not necessarily right after. It is after that, generally, though, that people get into this spot. So I think it's because we go, okay, we've got this now, right? We've nailed this down. We've got this. Now we got to go do life,
Life.
like have kids,
Exactly.
work on that career, maybe aging parents or hobbies or interest or
Yeah.
whatever it else.
True life. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so in order to do that, since we think we've got the relationship down, we hit the pause button and we think we'll get back to us down the road. So that's the pause button. And unfortunately, what often happens is the unpause keeps rolling out forward, right? It gets further and further out because our habits get to be around the problem with the pause button, and that is disconnection. Relationships are going one of two ways. They're either growing and expanding, or they're shrinking and dying. And so when we hit the pause button, we think we're putting it into suspended animation, but we're really withdrawing the connection. That's what keeps the relationship going, what keeps it interesting, what keeps it juicy. That's the thing that disappears.
Right. Yeah. And I think that when people, like you said, hit that pause button, they think if everything is good, especially if they're just gotten married or they have a good quality relationship, and then you look back, I want to say sometimes 10 years later, after kids are growing up, and you're like, what just happened? Where did those 10 years go? It doesn't even have to be 10 years. It could be a year. It could be 6 months. And people look back and go, wait a second, have we had intimacy? When was the last time we kissed? When was the last time we
Mm,
touched? When was the last time we
yeah,
fucked? That
yeah.
was the last time we did all these things. And you don't realize it because things are good. And then all of a sudden they're not. So what are some signs that you see that couples realize that, oh my gosh, we're getting to this stage where, are we roommates? Are we friends? Where are we? Like what kind of signs do people show?
So let's break it back. You said that couples realize that. Unfortunately, many times one person kind of realizes this
Realizes.
because
Okay.
it's painful. And connection is a deeply rooted need that we all have. So when it's not there, we tend to look for and find some ways to fill that in somewhere else. So being overly connected with kids, with colleagues, with our work, with friends, with sometimes other people outside of the marriage, the connection need is going to find its way through our life. And so if it's not being met here, it's elsewhere. And sometimes one person, generally one person, says, wait a minute, this is painful. This we're not connecting. Sometimes it is painful because the other person has started, you realize that your spouse is connecting elsewhere, right? And so
Right. You're
they've
feeling
gone
that.
ahead and you're feeling the distance. Yeah.
Right.
And that feels like, so they've done research that that disconnection feeling lights up the same part of the brain that registers with when your body is hurt, when there's something actually in pain in your body. And so it feels bodily like there's pain, and you tend to try to find something to soothe the pain. And at that point, it's where can I find this need to be met? And so then you start building up more and more of these bad habits of
Mhm.
disconnection. So one person often is the one going, we need to work on this, or one person is going, oh my gosh, we're really in a crisis. Before the other person either goes, yeah, I've already figured out somewhere else, or says, what are you talking about? This is just a stage of life, And so it's
Right.
it's usually a disconnection between them, even in that discussion about disconnection.
So why does it take so long sometimes for people to realize or bring it up? Is it because they're just so distracted by so many other things, or are they just all of a sudden just feeling this like, wait a second, is it like this light bulb, or why does it take so long for people to actually have those conversations?
Part of it is momentum. Yeah, you come into the relationship with a lot of momentum, and you assume that's gonna carry it. And part of it because we lose track of what we're not sharing. So you talked about, gosh, how long has it been since we were intimate? How long has it been since we kissed? How long has it been since we had a deep conversation? That doesn't mean you're not having conversations. You're often
It's not
talking
that
about
deep.
the it's not the depth, right? And so
Right.
you're talking about the routine of life. You're talking
Work,
about
school, kids.
kids, yeah.
Right.
And this was something, and so years ago, I remember this couple, and I said, you guys are disconnected, so I want you to try this. I want you to, and I knew what was going to happen. I want you to go to dinner this week, just the two of you, no kids, just the two of you. Go to dinner, and we're going to talk about it next week. And so they came back the next week, and I said, "How was dinner?" And they said, "Oh, it was great. We it took a little while for us to get talking." And so I said, "What'd you talk
What
about?"
did you talk about?
The kids,
Right.
their
Work.
family budget,
Right.
work, and the schedule coming up. And I
Right.
said, "So what did you learn about each other in that exchange?" And they started looking at me, and I said, "That's the problem. You're talking about you're filling in the blank of connection."
Surface.
And yeah, and so you often see, and that now more often it's this. People are just using the phone instead of connecting with each other. And so either way, that disconnection feels like there's something fill in the blanks, and the momentum, you feel like you've got this thing going, and you're not aware of the fact that the disconnection is just growing between you.
Right. And that's probably why communication alone is not something that's going to fix it, because it really needs to be something in depth. And I'm working with a couple right now where it's just nonstop work, 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 work. And the gentleman is like, I just want to know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're wanting, desiring. She goes, well, I told you yesterday how frustrated I was with work. And or with selling something with the house, and he's like,
Mhm.
no, and I'm like, no, that's not what we're
So
talking about.
he's aware of what's not happening there. She feels like the conversation, the chatter that goes on is there. And so that's that mismatch. But you're right, the communication. So this is probably one of the biggest myths, is one of the reasons that I kind of walked away from the therapy world. Is the biggest myth is we got to fix that communication.
Communication. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember so many times people would come in and say, "We need to learn communication skills. Teach us communication skills." I'm like, "That." So I would sit there peacefully, listen to them, 25, 30, 35 minutes, and I would go, "It's interesting. I've understood every single word you've said to each other, and you've understood every single word you've said to each other. You don't have a communication problem. It's what you're communicating that's the
Communicating.
problem, right? And so communication is a way of getting information from one place to another. And so if you're connected, you're communicating that connection. If you're disconnected, you're communicating the disconnection.
Disconnection, right. Right. And so it's not necessarily, I mean, listen, communication is important. And I think that is still a skill that people
Sure.
need to learn. So once they learn that how to communicate, then they can add in what to communicate. Is that kind of how your thinking is needing to be done?
Most, well, most people have the basic skills of communication. So they don't have habits of communicating with each other on anything of depth. So they
Right.
stay surface. So sure, they can work on that, but until they are connected, their communication is not going to change
Right.
what they're delivering. They're
Your
still
relationship.
delivering that disconnection. Yeah.
Exactly. And when we talked before the episode, you had mentioned about marriage being a system. And so, what exactly, if you could explain that in a way that people can understand, what does it mean it's a system?
Yeah. So we're surrounded by systems, and our body is a system, right? Our body regulates itself, has the organs that do all the pieces. That's a system. We look at someone and go, that person, but then we look behind that and go, wait, there's
How are
stuff in
they
there
thinking? What are
working.
their bodies doing? Right.
Yeah, and we can see that easily. I mean, my computer is a system, but it's in a box, right? So I don't notice all the moving part. Well, not many moving parts, but I don't notice the pieces inside. Well, the same with a marriage. It's a dance together. So if we think about it as a dance, that's a system of movement between two people. And we learn how that goes back and forth. And so we have a system of the relationship, and then we have the systems that help us run it. So it's a bunch of interrelated systems. We have them all around us. And in fact, I've had people, when I ask them about how, what is your system of connecting with each other? And they go, well, I don't have a system. And my response is,
That's
that
a
is a
system.
system. It's just not a good system, right? And
Right.
so if we change that some, so there is the system of the marriage, and then there are the systems we have in place that help us with our what we might call habits, right? So when I get up in the morning, I have a system of how I kind of do
Yeah,
things, make coffee, feed the dog, all those things. I don't have to think about it because it's automatic. And
right.
that's the nature of systems. They run on automatic. And since we don't really pay attention to that, if they are no longer systems of connection, but systems of disconnection, they
That's what
still are
you
running.
Right, right. And so, what kind of so-called habits or systems do you notice that kind of take away that whole idea of desire? Because people can love each other and people can be like, "Oh, I love my partner," but that intimacy, the desire goes away with some of those bad habits. So, what are some
Yeah.
habits that you notice besides waking up and looking right at your phone as soon as you
Yeah.
wake up and open your eyes? You should be like turning around, kissing your partner, hugging your partner. So what are some of the other habits that you notice?
Yeah, so you named that that level of connection. They don't have the physical level. Maybe it would be helpful for us to talk a little about the levels of connection, just so we
Sure.
have those. Yeah, yeah. So I think that there are three levels of connection, and this creates almost bullseyes for people when they look at what's not going on in a relationship. So the three levels. First one is physical connection, and when I say that, people go, "Oh, you mean sex?" No, but
No.
yes, that is part of that. But any loving touch, and that is the big thing, any loving touch, bodily contact is that physical connection. We share that with every other warm-blooded creature to some level. Some want more than others. My dog is sleeping beside me. She's all about physical affection, right? She wants to be up against me. She wants me to pet her. That's physical connection, and we do that throughout life. It's probably the most primal because it's nonverbal.
Right.
If if my
Speaks
my
it speaks
spouse,
a lot of words without speaking a word.
yeah, if my spouse is having a hard day and I just give her a hug, she feels that connection. It's physical
Right.
connection, right? So, the physical connection, basic level, nonverbal. Next one up is emotional connection. It is nonverbal and verbal. So as you're sitting here nodding your head,
Like I'm
that is
agreeing with
not.
you, right?
That's
Right.
right. So I go, oh, okay, we're on the same page with this, right? We're connecting on this, and then I know we're in trouble. so, so we use nonverbal clues all the time in how we are in an emotional connection, but there's more to it. Part of it is an internal sense. Like, do I feel like my wife gets me? Does she laugh at my jokes? Does she, think that I am interesting in any way or not? And doesn't get me, right? That's the other possibility. That's disconnection. So emotional connection happens on that. Do we get each other and do we support each other and feel supported? That's requires verbal verbiage. So that is the verbal layer, but it's also nonverbal. We can support each other just by, wow, ooh, the nonverbal clues, right? Then we cross over to the third level, which is what a lot of people have missed, that this is another level of connection. That's a spiritual connection. And when I say that, people go, oh, you mean religion? No, but yes, that is a piece of that. If you're a religious person, those religious beliefs mark your deep values, what you think are important. And that is the arena of values. The spiritual level is the arena of values. It's also about our dreams, our hopes, our fears. Um, so it used to be that when I was in my office, people who were getting married in 7 different locations in the town where I was living at that point, 7 places of faith, had to come to my office for 3 visits. So I
Okay.
heard lots of stories about how they fell in love, and almost always there was a conversation. And usually that conversation started kind of late in the evening, even at night, and it went until early in the morning. And it's where they talked about where they came from in life, what their family was like, how they grew up, what are their values that they took from that, what are their hopes and their dreams of what they want. And that's the moment, and I remember it in my own relationship, that's the moment when you go, wow, this person is important. Because one, I'm sharing this very vulnerable part of my life, but two, we kind of have this match. We have this shared value or maybe even shared understandings of where we were, and that's that spiritual level. That is totally verbal. You're not going to
Right.
know that unless somebody shares it.
Right.
The reason that's important is because after that conversation, some couples stop having that discussion entirely. They may still end up having sex sometimes, and they may end up having the moments where you go, okay, I had a bad day and you're on my side, and then there's something missing. Sometimes as the disconnection happens, they start, coming down one by one. Sometimes it's the last one is feeling like they are somehow in connection with each other emotionally, but the physical goes
Right.
away, the spiritual goes away, and sometimes all three go missing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I want to talk a little bit more about it. I just want to take a quick commercial break, and then I want to ask you a few more questions about those levels of connection, because I know that it definitely affects relationships if people get stuck in some of those places. So we'll be right back. The best sex life is not behind you. It is waiting for you on the other side of one conversation. I work with midlife men and women who are done settling and ready to actually do something about it. We go deep on desire, confidence, communication, and everything that's been blocking you from the sex life you actually want, because you should be having the kind of sex that makes you forget what day it is. And I'm going to get you there. Your first step is free. Go to drstacyfriedman.com, and at the top of the page, you will see free consultation. Click it and let's talk. So we're back. So thanks for listening. The 3 levels of connection. So is there one place that you seem to see people get stuck more often in those different levels, or is it kind of change just per couple?
A lot of times, the first one that goes away is the spiritual connection, and that's why I bring it up, is because people don't recognize that is that realm. You stop talking about what's important, and you start talking about just the daily mundane, and you expect that you're going to be on the same path together, right? Because one of the things that as humans, we're not aware of how we're internally changing as much as we're changing. And so if we're not talking about that, the drift can be pretty extreme. And so you're not sharing that. And suddenly you're like, where were we even headed? What is this going to be about?
Right.
That's often the one that goes first. But I've seen people who are able to maintain one and are missing the other two. Sometimes I've seen them where they basically come in and say, we're just functioning together and that's it. All three are gone. A lot of times you will see where one though is just gone, whether it's the physical, the emotional, or the spiritual. Any of them can go. They just don't realize that those are those pieces. Well, first of all, they don't realize the pieces. Second, they don't realize how important connection is for
Right.
nurturing the relationship.
Right. And that's why so many times when I'm working with people that are struggling with so-called intimacy, that is a very, very common, that spiritual piece, because I didn't really have a name for it and you just kind of gave it a name. And so that helps me understand it better as well. But a lot of people will say, well, when we first got together, we used to talk about all these things, and
Yeah.
now we're just talking about life in general. And that's the thing, is it's very general. And just like this couple I was telling you about, she's talking about work and he's like, I want to know how you're feeling. She goes, I told you I feel crappy because it was a bad day at work. He's like,
Yeah.
no. So, if how do we get them to understand, let's say, for example, this woman that I'm working with, how do we help her understand, because he's ready to, take his hair out and say, this is what we mean by intimacy, spiritual connection. We're talking about our lives, what we want from things, and not just how we feel about work. And how do we get them to understand what is needed?
So a lot of times with couples, I go back to, with one or the other, go back to how did you fall in
The
love?
beginning. Yeah.
The beginning. Yeah,
Yeah.
and to talk about, because that will tell them how they got that connection going,
In
and
the first
where
place.
that connection from the first. And so then they can identify where did it drop off.
Right.
That is a helpful just to kind of think through, because if you can say where it dropped off, you're also able to identify,
The
kind of
issue
what
is
the right what was underlying it. Was it we got so caught up in the kids or the job or whatever else? Usually the starting point for any of this is to go, oh, the pause button. Yeah, we did that. Oh, the three levels of connection. Wow, we're not connecting in that way. Just kind of as a mental piece. The next piece is to ask the question, what's what's in the way of doing that? And one of the big things that's in the way is generally fear, because now there's something that you haven't done before, haven't done in a while, right? And
right.
so
Something you have to
it,
work on, something you have to actually do.
you
People
have
don't
to
like
do.
to do.
And they don't, well, more than that, people don't like to feel awkward.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that stops a lot of people. And so a lot of times people say, it just felt so awkward. And my response is, everything feels awkward until you get used to it. That's
Right.
the nature of things, of trying something new. If you can't do that, it's going to be hard to start any new hobby or activity, because it's always going to feel awkward at the beginning.
Right. And that's the same with just people that say are in a sexless marriage. Many times I'll have people come to me and it'll be 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 8 years. I have someone 8 years that have not had sex and they want to try to get back to having sex. It's going to be awkward, whether it's
Yeah.
6 months. I mean, obviously 8 years would be more awkward than 6 months, but same thing with a new job. You start a new job, it's awkward. You don't know what you're doing. And so we have to be open to doing the work and feeling that discomfort and being in that being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
And part of what you just said is why it's so hard for people. They, at one point, they weren't uncomfortable.
Right.
And so part of what throws us off is we're now reverting back. So if you have a hobby, and you don't do it for a long time and you start back, it's going to feel awkward. Maybe you have some residual knowledge that's back there, some muscle memory. It's kind of like, they always would say, you never forget how to ride a bike. That is not true.
Well, my husband's that way with golf. He used to play golf all the time and now he doesn't. And when he does go, he says it's awkward. He goes, I feel
Yeah.
weird hitting things. So yeah, it definitely.
So it is the nature, and many people can recognize that when they've done something new, it's felt awkward until they got a little bit of mastery, not complete mastery, but just beyond that piece. And if we can relate to that, if you go, oh, that's just how we learn, that's just the nature of it. So a lot of times I'll say to a couple, you remember that first time you tried to hold hands or tried to kiss or anything of that beginning point? And most people will say, yeah, that was awkward. I didn't know how they were going to react. I didn't know how they were going to respond. And it's the same thing they're saying now. I don't know whether I could reach out to my spouse because I don't know how they'll respond.
It's that
My
fear.
Yeah, and so my response is, and if you don't, you never will, right? That's the problem. If you don't try to bridge that, you'll never know how they'll respond. It's possible that you'll be exactly right in your worst fears that they'll reject you. It's possible, but at least now we're dealing with where things are. It's
Right.
also possible that it'll go so much better than you thought, or somewhere in between, which is more likely.
Right. And then, so as couples are kind of moving through these different stages or levels of connection, do you notice that desire and intimacy shifts in a positive way? I'm assuming it helps
Yeah,
them in
so
connection as well.
yeah, one important thing to distinguish is it's like a stage. Sometimes kind of people think, oh, I do one, then two, then three. These three different levels you can
All together.
do all the time, right? That's so it's you don't have to build into them, but you deepen them. So you can start. Many times, people who are disconnected want to go from 0 to 60. That's not particularly helpful or functional.
Right.
That creates
It has to
too
slowly
much.
build.
Slow progression is much more helpful. So um, that's the first thing I would say is it's not so much that you're going to a different stage of those
Okay.
three connections as much as you're deepening the level of connection, each of those levels. And you find that there's some stutter steps that happen there. So you start one area and it opens up other areas, but then that area may then grow faster than another. And so my thing is, those are the three areas you want to be building on. You're not going to get to the end of that. You're going to start the process of rebuilding that. And as you rebuild it, you kind of get the muscles going again, right? So you have a little muscle memory, but can you strengthen those muscles?
Right. So once you start doing that, you may be working on one of those so-called levels, but then because that level is improving, it could also improve some of the other levels without you even realizing it or even trying it, because you're starting, like you said, muscle memory and just kind of bringing you back as a couple.
Now, this brings in a piece that you probably hear as much as I have of people going, I don't want to have physical intimacy because I feel so disconnected emotionally. And the other person's going, I feel so disconnected physically that I don't want to be connected emotionally.
Or I can't,
And,
right?
and it's chicken or egg. And so the question is, can you build the pieces however you're willing to, whatever piece of that? Can you intentionally stretch yourself a little bit? And that's probably what we're talking about for most people, is that stretching their comfort of that, of going, okay, I could be more physically connected with my spouse. I could be more emotionally connected. I could be more spiritually connected with my spouse. It's just going to feel awkward. It's going to be a little scary because there's vulnerability in that. And humans don't want to feel vulnerable. I mean, that's
Right.
built into us, right? And so, if you're willing to say, I'm not going to get into this chicken or egg thing, I'm going to try to build simultaneously those levels of connection, then it kind of comes back. My belief is that the feeling of being in love comes from an overabundance of connection. So as the connection is, dwindling, suddenly you hear people going, I love you, but I'm not in love with
I'm
you.
not in love. Right.
We've gotten to
Right.
that point. And so how do you get back to here? Because they'll often say, I will never feel that way again. I'm stuck here. To which I often say, but one time you felt this and you never thought you'd feel differently. That's the nature of feelings. So if we can see that this is something that can be built, building connection brings us back to feeling that in love feeling.
Yeah. And that's a thing that a lot of people say, because I know I hear it all the time as well. And a lot of times people are hesitant when they say that they love the person, but they're not in love. And that keeps that sex and intimacy distant. And it's hard to have sex with someone that you've been in a relationship for years with, that you just don't love in that way. And it is awkward, it is uncomfortable. So I always try to get the people to understand, like, where is your comfort level? Are you okay with kissing? Well, yeah, I
Mhm.
can kiss. Are you okay with tongue kissing? Well, I'm not so sure. Okay, so push the boundary just a little bit if you can, and try that, because sometimes when you do those things again, it could almost be like the beginning, and
Mhm.
things might kind of, like you said, muscle memory. It might be like, oh God, I do remember kissing. I do
Yeah.
remember I
Yeah.
liked it.
A lot of times the body will follow along. If you're
Right,
acting in a certain way, the body will follow along many times, not always, but many times. And so there is the place many people will say, well, it wasn't like this in the beginning, right? Before I
right.
wanted to I wanted to try more. And so that's the loss of that connection. And so to be able to go, okay, so the switch is at the beginning of a relationship, a lot of that love is tied into adrenaline and other biochemicals, and then it switches to endorphins. And the difference between the two is adrenaline pushes us. We're driven by adrenaline.
Right.
Endorphins we have to manufacture by doing loving things.
Yeah. No, that's a great information. And I actually just have I have a whole bunch of ebooks that I just made, and two of them are about igniting your intimacy and reigniting passion in long-term relationships. I know that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, but I'm going to just take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. Real quick, because this is important. If your relationship feels more like a great roommate situation rather than a hot, connected partnership, this one is for you. My Pleasure Playbook, Ignite Your Intimacy, is a step-by-step guide to unlocking passion, connection, pleasure, not just in the bedroom, but everywhere. We're talking the foundation stuff that actually makes sex better: emotional safety, communication, touch, novelty, and blowing up every myth that's been killing your desire. $27, link in the show notes, or drstacyfriedman.com. Go to shop and look up the Pleasure Playbooks. Love didn't go anywhere. It just needs the fuel, and I'm giving it to you. Check it out. Okay, so I wanted to, talk about a little bit where you had mentioned about one person kind of being able to change a relationship. So, how do you feel that one person can create that real change without, having to manipulate their partner or do something like that with your
Yeah.
program?
So let's talk about why they can do that first, and we'll talk about some how. The why is we to go back. One person almost always is there's one person going, oh wait, there's a problem here, and the other spouse is still kind of in that suspended animation. So it is going to start that way. But the reason why, back to the systems thing, is if you change one piece of the system, it changes the entire system. So we use dance as an analogy. I can choose how I'm going to change my dance steps. I've had people say, one person can't do anything. It takes two to tango. And my response is, you're already dancing. You may not like the dance you're doing, but you already are dancing. That happened long ago, and you've committed to the dance. So maybe you change your steps, because there are different ways you might do that. And if you change your steps, it often changes the other's steps. They adjust to that.
Right. It's reacting to what that new material is, basically,
Yeah.
and if someone, and that's what I tell people many times when they're, let's say, getting into an argument. And, a lot of the reactions might be like, well, you did this. Well, you did this. If you all of a sudden just change, okay, well, I understand what you're saying, and you change the way that you react, the person might be like, oh, wait a second. They're not yelling at me. They're not coming back at me. How do I react to this? So then they have to change their reaction. And so you could see how one step, one reaction can totally change someone else's reaction. And so when you have people trying to do that on their own, is it something that they can help rebuild sexually as well? Or is it more of just the communication part or the steps, those levels?
Both. We talked about the wiring that's in us for connection.
Right.
That doesn't go away just because we're not getting it, anymore here. And because of how much we want that, when it starts coming, flying almost below the radar, right? You don't want to be kind of the big things. I see people like they're going for the big gestures, and they're going for we're going to do date night, and we're going to do this, sexy weekend, and these big presents. That's too much for
It's
what the
overwhelming.
relationship can handle. It's overwhelming.
Right.
It triggers the other person's fears of being overwhelmed by that fear of intimacy,
Right. Then that
and
wall
so
goes right up. Yeah.
they distance. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of research in psychology about this. the pursuer distancer dynamic. I just call it the chaser spacer dynamic. One person chases, the other person spaces, and you've got to decide you're going to pace to find that place where you can be invitational in the connection piece that is not so it feels
Old.
like it's forced. Yeah.
Right,
When,
right. Well, where someone can actually come in rather than running away. You
right.
know, it's that like
It,
compromise, I guess you could see that perfect compromise.
so I'm always asking, what can the relationship handle in the connect? If you're very disconnected, a little bit of connection is all it can handle. If you're pretty connected, there more can be done. So if you want to do date nights and romantic weekends, you've just got to build to that to get to the place where the relationship is ready for that level of intimacy and connection. Until then, you're trying to be invitational. And that
Right,
can be small things, so you mentioned the changing the, well, you said or you did kind of scenario. I've watched so many couples who want to change things, but they are so stuck in that they keep ping-ponging back and forth on who
right.
started this. And just goes back further and further. And I'm sitting there
Doesn't
going, we
matter.
could go back. Yeah. No. One of the most ineffective things I see is when people try to drive somewhere else by looking in the rearview mirror. It just doesn't work. They need to say, where do we want to get to? And how
Right.
can I navigate that approach rather than what happened back there? It's not that it's irrelevant. It's just not going to help you very much in trying to continue navigating forward. So if I can say, you know what, I want a connected relationship. Those 3 levels of connection give us some frameworks for that. I want a connected relationship, and I have my spouse who's not quite there yet, and they start throwing out disconnection. I can either bite on that and disconnect further and
Right,
justify and blame and whatever else, or I can go, oh, okay, that's what this is. This is a distancing piece. How can I begin to not react? How can I choose to respond to this in loving ways? And you gave a great one of, oh, I see that, whatever, how that affected you, to be able to claim that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Let's try
right.
again.
Right. And I think that so many times couples get in this space, and I try to tell them, you are in this together. You want to make this better. You guys are fighting. You guys don't want divorce. You don't want to have to go your separate ways. So kind of lead with compassion and curiosity versus judging your partner as to what you thought they were thinking or what they did, and try to work on that. And I see a lot of people build resentment
Mm.
over those years. And so when you get to this place where you have one person that has, let's say, so much resentment, how do you help the clients rebuild that with potentially just one person, rebuilding on that resentment?
So a lot of times, the resentment has behind it a hidden wish that the other person was going to realize what they've done, come
Okay.
up with a huge apology, right? And somehow take responsibility on themselves instead of going, this resentment isn't serving me. One of the books I wrote was about forgiveness for this reason. People don't understand how to forgive. So it's
Right.
not a conceptual piece, it's a framework for how you actually forgive, which for me is letting go of the effect of that. I think that's an important piece in this. But I like one word that you used, I want to key in on, and that's curiosity. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of times I'm working with people who are so disconnected that they have a hard time being empathetic with their spouse.
Yes.
Curiosity is the first step towards empathy, and being able to ask the question, I wonder what's going on in my spouse. I wonder why they're reacting this way. I wonder how they're feeling, leads naturally, if you follow that, to the empathy without having to feel the empathy at that point. So curiosity is a great skill when there's that disconnection, to just be going, I wonder how this is feeling to them. I wonder how my reactions, my responses are feeling to them. And I
Right.
wonder how I might be able to change that.
Right, because people are, usually getting angry. I'm like, they get so angry all the time. I'm like, well, where's that anger coming from? Be curious about it. Is it coming from hurt? Is it coming because they feel like they're not being listened to? Don't look at the anger part. Come with that curiosity and speak to them and have that conversation. And that helps with that intimacy. That helps bringing you to that next level, that more spiritual level, that I believe that you're getting to the depth of things versus all surface.
Yeah,
So,
and so just to be curious about anger for a minute, anger is always a secondary emotion. And when
right.
people realize that, it helps them go, oh, wait, it's not just I'm angry, but what's behind that? And the three things that are
What's
behind it
behind it?
are hurt, fear, or threat. Those are the big things that drive our outward expression of anger. And the problem is, I've watched it, and you probably have too, where couples think that they're telling their spouse they're hurt, and all that comes out is the anger, that because that is the
Right.
external way they do it, right? And so and at the end, I've stopped them, and they're like, "Well, I'm trying to tell them how I'm hurt," and I'm like, "That's coming out in very angry ways."
Right. Right.
So we,
Well,
so when you
yeah.
realize that, then you can back up a little bit and even be more curious about what's driving my anger, what's the hurt, fear, threat, and curious about what's driving the anger in their spouse. What's the hurt, fear, threat? Resentment is simply the anger that never got processed.
Hmm. Good point. Good point. So we're going to take one last commercial break, and then we'll finish up and hear a little bit more about how people can find you and all that other good information. So we'll be right back.
Are you looking to boost your energy, circulation, and intimacy?
You've been carrying your sex life questions around alone for way too long. Imagine being surrounded by midlife men and women who are just as hungry for a better sex life as you are, and finally understanding what their bodies are doing and why as they move through this thing called midlife. That is the Vibe Tribe. Live Q&As with me and courses and conversations that actually go somewhere. Equal parts spicy, educational, and the kind of connection that most people didn't even know they were missing. So try it free for a week, and for the full experience, do that free week in the upgraded men's or women's Vibe Tribe so you can see exactly what that elevated space has to offer. Go directly to drstacyfriedman.com and click Vibe Tribe. Come and find your people. So, upon some closing reflections of the podcast here, I wanted to ask you about some steps that someone may be able to take to help unpause their relationship. And I want to bring that into because you said you have an app, and I'd love to hear a little bit about is it called Unpause app?
It is the Unpause app, yes.
So tell us a
And
little
I
bit.
designed it. Yeah, so we've talked about little pieces of this, and just to put it together, right? The habits that we have of relating are the issue. We haven't built those habits of relating, and so part of the app is to walk you through recreating those habits. And usually there's some things of I've got to not be doing, but there's a lot more of what I've got to start doing, right? And
Right.
so we build in, there's a morning piece, there's usually a teaching segment, and then a morning setting up your day. And what are you planning on? And then reflecting on it, not to blame yourself for what didn't get done, but to say, so what do I want to have different tomorrow? And so there's this back and forth of educating, and then what are you going to do about this? Because that's where it changes, those actions. Part of what I always encourage people to do is to be invitational in their connection. So let me kind of give an example. I can send a text to my wife that says, "Hey, I was thinking of you. Hope you have a good day." That's a loving text. It doesn't require, I call that a one-way text. It doesn't require her to respond
Response.
back, but she feels like I was being loving, right? And so if a friend sends you that, you would go, "Oh, that was nice of them to think of me."
Right.
That's a little bit of connection. And so there are other things like I call it a tag along to say, "Hey, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. Would you like to go with me? I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee, or a book at the bookstore, or going to the store, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Would you like to go with me?" As opposed to date night. We're going to have a date Friday night. You've got to get dressed up. We're going to go to this restaurant, and we're going to focus on us. And the other person's going, "I don't know. I don't want to do that."
Right. Because all of a
An
sudden they just
invitation.
gotta have sex.
Yep. Or I'm going to have to talk. We're going to actually have to talk together. Right? We haven't talked
Right.
for months, right? That's too much on it. But if I say I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee, how long does it take to grab a cup of coffee? 20, 30 minutes. Would you like to go with me? The answer is yes or no. I don't feel pressured. And so they can say sure and go along, or they can say no. But even if they say that, there's still connection embedded in that, in these small little actions. So you're trying to build the little actions along the way to build a foundation. And what most people find is that when they're more invitational, yes, their spouse is, and so they'll come and say, "Well, that didn't work." And I'm like, "How many times do you do that?" "Once." "Okay, keep
Right.
doing
And they
it."
may not have liked coffee, or they may have been, there might be another reason
Exactly.
why.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm going to go for a walk. Would you like to go with me? I'm going to walk the dog around the block. Would you like to go with me? Even if they're saying no, they're still going, wait, I was included in something and it wasn't a high risk thing, right? So you make it a low risk entry point. If they say no, no biggie. And it's not like, would you like to go with me?
Right.
It's, would you like to
You
go
keep
with me?
the expectation so that way it feels safe.
You make it, and if they say, you know what, I'm busy right now, that's great. Maybe another time. And
Right.
you just go do it. And that. So the other part of that is you go do it. One of the things that you talked about the manipulation, instead of them feeling manipulated, if you say, hey, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. Would you like to go with me? And they go, no, you go, no, I'm not either. Well, you just,
You just
prove
put
that
them
this
in a
wasn't
place
real.
of discomfort and like, okay, great. If I say no, this is what's going to happen.
Exactly. And that's pressure. And that's what we're trying to get away from. There has to be invitation until there's enough of foundation that you know more and more, just by intuition of what would be okay.
Right. So that's the Unpause app. And I just had the banner up here. And for people that can't actually see the show, I will have it in the show notes. But you also have some books. So let us know exactly where we can find you and your books and all that good information.
Yeah, so Save the Marriage is where I've hung out for years. The Save the Marriage website went up in '99, and it's continued to
Wow.
grow. Yeah, a dinosaur in the internet world. But and so there is a link, savethemarriage.com/podcast, that if somebody is listening and go like, I'm not sure what I need. So Save the Marriage system is designed for people who really are on the edge of, they're truly in crisis. It's active crisis in the relationship. Unpause your marriage is not designed for that. It's for people who go, we just need to unpause our marriage. But what if you don't know? Savethemarriage.com/podcast has an assessment that you can do. It's called
Oh,
my GPS assessment, and it will let you know kind of where you are. If you do any of those things, you're going to end up being on my email list at some level, and that will allow you to find me. If you're interested in my books, they're at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and wherever else you get your books.
and probably all on your website as well.
They are.
Right. Yeah. So what I like to do at the end of every episode is give a little permission slip that has to kind of do with what we've talked about. And what I like to tell people is that you're allowed to admit that your relationship feels paused, even if nothing dramatic happens, because maybe sometimes it's just this initial feeling. You're allowed to want desire back, not just survival. You're allowed to stop waiting for the other person to change first, because as we've heard, we can do it on our own. And wanting intimacy doesn't make you needy. It just makes you human. And you can choose to show up differently with intention and clarity. That's not manipulation. It's leadership. So if this episode stirred something in you, don't shut it down. Notice it, sit with it, and give yourself permission to take a step forward. Reach out to Dr. Lee Baucom, get some of his information, reach out to me. And then one of the examples is send a genuine appreciation text with an invitation, as you said, and ask one honest question to your partner if you think that you're feeling paused. So I thank you for your honesty, your approach, for all the information that we shared today. And it really just starts with action and not waiting.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stacey. You're exactly right. And give yourself permission to be a team again.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for being here. And that is it for this episode of the Purple Passion Project, where we keep it real with just the right amount of spice. And so, like I said before, if today stirred something in you, let it. And if you love what you heard, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms and on my YouTube at Dr. Stacy Friedman. And if you're ready to go deeper, follow me all over social media at Dr. Stacy Friedman for resources, tips, place to find adult products, some great ebooks, or just for some personal coaching support. Until next time, stay curious, stay turned on, and never apologize for wanting more. We'll see you next time.
This has been the Purple Passion Project with host Dr. Stacy Friedman. Tune in each week as Dr. Stacy breaks down walls, busting myths, and gives you permission to want more with no shame, no filters, and definitely no small talk. Check in every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, on your favorite streaming platforms. We look forward to seeing you next time. Be sure to visit drstacyfriedman.com to learn more.